That means honestly confronting the crisis of Islamic extremism, and it means standing together against the murder of innocent Muslims, the oppression of women, the persecution of Jews, and the slaughter of Christians.
President Trump speaking in Saudi Arabia over the weekend, the liberal media, though, criticizing him for doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Headlines calling his speech targeted Muslims, drew Muslim anger, and was inconsistent. We had one CNN correspondent tweeting, using terms like Islamist extremists, Islamist terror. Trump tiptoes around using the term radical Islamic terror, even though he talked about it on the campaign trail. That's Jim Acosta. He's gotten in fights with the president in the past. Let's bring in an American Islamic Forum for Democracy founder, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. So good to see you, Doctor.
Thank you.
First of all, before we get to the soundbite from President Obama, what do you make of CNN's Jim Acosta criticizing the president for not saying the term radical Islamist terror?
Boy, you know, they're reaching, because on the one hand, they wanted him to address human rights. On the other hand, when he even mentions the word Islamic or Islamist, which is really the root cause of the human rights disaster, which is theocracy, the men in robes who take away the rights of women's minorities, etc., they don't want that. So they're really reaching, looking for something to criticize. They don't want to legitimize our president, regardless of what party you are. So I think it sort of proves their hypocrisy, the fact that they really never said the same thing. Obama never addressed issues of human rights. He ignored them and actually went apologizing for America, beginning and ending his speeches with blaming America, saying that we apologize for whatever we did. This president didn't do that, and they're sort of reaching and saying, well, he said Islamic and radical, and yet none of the Arab governments, if anything, I'll tell you, as a reformer, I wanted a lot more of that from President Trump, and I think we should have had more in order to shift the conversation from violent extremism to violent Islamism. So actually, I wanted more, not less.
I hear what you're saying. Let's get back to CNN. Where was CNN, Doctor, when President Obama said this?
The United States is not and will never be at war with Islam. And I'm also proud to carry with me the goodwill of the American people and a greeting of peace from Muslim communities in my country. Assalamu alaikum. Islam is not part of the problem in combating violent extremism. It is an important part of promoting peace. The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam.
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim.
We have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam.
Yeah, we get that. We're not at war with Islam. No American, I mean, I know a lot of Americans don't feel that way about the Muslim faith at all. And President Trump would say, yes, a lot of Muslims have been slaughtered by terrorists. But that's not the point. It's missing the point, what Obama was saying. It was an apologetic tone. Now, was his apologetic tone and ignoring the big elephant in the room about the problem of terror, as you point out? Was that helpful, his tone?
Well, I think that ultimately, not only is it helpful, what the left misses in their blind criticism of President Trump's speech is that, who are we speaking to? President Obama, by generalizing and becoming sort of the excommunicator-in-chief for Islam, saying this is all Islamic and sort of declaring what is not Islam and what is, basically fed into those dictators that were in the room. When you call it Islamist, President Trump was putting them on notice, saying, I have your number. I understand that you may be with us against ISIS, but the underpinnings of the ideology is Islamist, and you need to deal with those ideologies.
But
and
Obama
I think
never
he
did
put
that,
him on
right?
notice.
Obama never addressed that, right?
He never did. He did the bidding of the theocrats by saying that it wasn't a problem within Islam. He racialized Islam instead of telling us that we had work to do. And I think if you're a Muslim on the streets of Saudi Arabia, Syria, Egypt, you want to hear the president call the Islamist movements what they are: a political, militant, theocratic movement that has many forms, and you call it what it is in order to enable reforms that would engage the people on the street and speak past those dictators that were in the room.
So I heard you earlier, you feel like the president should have said even more. Do you feel like his speech on Islam and terror, do you feel it was effective in your opinion?
Well, I think we have to put it in perspective. We had 8 years of a president that was absent, in denial. And now we finally are, first we have to reboot the relationship with the Sunni governments in order to defeat ISIS. So he can't go in and just sort of say everything he did in the campaign. But secondly, I hope in the long term, by itself, it's not effective against Islamism to engage a terror center, a counter-terrorist center in Riyadh. It's not going to work. These guys delay, they give you 20, 30 plans, and they just want to stay in power. These governments see that the Arab awakening is roiling the people of the Middle East, and real reforms, Liz, against the ideologies that gird up these governments is going to take revolutions, a change in the freedom of people to speak truth to power.
Right.
And I think ultimately President Trump is the person to do that because he is anti-establishment. He does have the gumption to speak truth to power.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, we love having you on the show. Come back soon.
Anytime. Thanks, Liz.
We got breaking news.